One of the most controversial, strange, borderline horrific stories in the Bible is the story of Abraham, who takes his son Isaac out to a mountain to sacrifice him because God told him to. Now that's crazy and horrible. And as a father, I can never get my head around it. But because it's all of that kind of dynamic intensity, it fascinates me. And I've studied every little element of that complicated story for decades. There's one element of that story that's really fascinating, and it's after it all happens. Of course, God doesn't actually have him sacrifice his son. He provides him a ram. There's all kinds of things that go with it, but there's this moment right after it where God says to Abraham, "Now I know you in a different way. Now I know you." How could God not know Abraham? What does that even mean? Are there things that God doesn't know? I mean, that's a fascinating question in the first place, but that's not actually what God means. What God means is that there's different ways to know something. Did he know Abraham? Absolutely. But had he experienced Abraham's intensity? Had he known Abraham's willingness to be obedient? Did he understand in a tangible, we've gone through this together kind of way who Abraham was? And at least in part, the answer was no. Not until this experience on the mountain. That's fascinating. If God is actually coming to know things, what does it mean to know anything? So how do we actually know something? How does something kind of get inside of us so that we know it inside and out and can imagine all its little pieces and bits, and it informs the way that we think and we have some sort of command of it? How do we even know if we like something or should ever even do it? Well, there's a couple of different ways to know something. I want to talk about both of them, but maybe in a unique way. Here's the first. You already know one way to know things, and that's just to read about it, to get educated, to learn about what is right in front of you. You can read, you can go online, you can ask Google, you can do all of these things. You can even talk to somebody maybe that does the thing that you are interested in. There's lots of wonderful ways to kind of get educated, to get knowledge, and knowledge is so important. You know, I really believe God gives us a brain and expects us to use it to its fullest creative, wondering, hope-filled potential. And so learning about things, in whatever way that makes sense to you, to gather all that information is hugely important. That could be a problem though. It's a weird problem. But they did a study not too long ago to try to figure out how learning something like that actually impacts your ability to do it or to experience it. And here's what I mean. One of the things that we do as human beings that's a little bit strange is that when we learn about something, we actually kind of store that as something that we have done. Now note that, not just learned about it, but something that we have taken part in. They did a study, and what they were trying to do is to figure out how could they effectively move the needle on homelessness? How could they get people to be more helpful with folks that were struggling in that situation? And so they thought, well, let's see if learning about it, even inspiring, people inspiring you about it, could affect whether you did something about it, right? Not just learning, but taking an action to make the homeless situation better. So they figured out one of the best ways to do that would be to see what would happen if they studied pastors, sermons, people like me teaching about homelessness in an environment where people are intended, purposed to learn and to take action. So they studied all these different preachers to figure out if they preached on homelessness, would that mean that the people that had heard about homelessness were gonna actually do something about homelessness? And one of the most depressing things happened, and that is they figured out that if you listen to a sermon about homelessness, you were less likely to do something about it. And they said, what in the world? And for people like me, that's pretty devastating. But here's what they figured out, and that was there's something about us that if we hear about it, learn about it, we feel like we've done something about it. So literally, I've learned about homelessness, so I have done something about homelessness. No, you haven't. You know more about it, but you've not actually taken any action to move the needle on the problem. But that's one way of knowing something. You know more about it. So it's really valuable, but inside of it is a little bit of danger. So how do we make sure that we not only know something, but we know it? Because in the Bible, it tells us, really interesting, it says, you can see but not see, you can hear but not understand. We've all had that experience, right? Where you like, I get it. You might even tell somebody, oh, I know that, I know all that. But really then 2 years later, you're like, I had no idea. Or worse than that, you tell somebody something, oh, it's this. And yeah, I know. And then a year later, they come back to you and they say, hey, what about this? And it's the idea that you told them, and you have to decide, am I gonna actually say, wait, I told you that a year ago? Or are you gonna say, great idea, let's do it? There's a word in Hebrew, it's yad. It's really interesting. It means to know. It actually is very close to the word for hand. The reason that is because there's a real difference between knowing something with your mind and knowing something sort of with your hand. I could read about a friend of mine. I could say, I know all about Cameron. I've read the book of Cameron. Cameron is interesting. There are many chapters on Cameron. There's a strangely large chapter on film filter camera light things. Just a lot. But there's something else that's more important, and that is if I shake Cameron's hand, if I know the shape of his shoulder, if I have an actual sense of Cameron as a man, that's really different than knowing about him. We have to know the experience of something if we're really gonna know it. And you know the difference, don't you? I mean, you really do. There's this experience where you can tell if you're talking to somebody if they've done a lot of reading about something or if they know what they're talking about because they've experienced it. It's a part of being human. So here's the thing. If you really want to know something, now you understand in part how to actually take it in. But if you're missing, if you can't quite grasp it, if there's something that's not quite connecting, maybe you know it, but you don't know it. So here's what you do. Get out of your head and into the world. Take a risk. Take a chance. Just something small. Start with something that's right in front of you and begin. If it's singing, sing. If you want to play an instrument, don't just learn about it. Play it. If you want to know about a different understanding of politics or religion or anything, don't just read about it. Meet someone that believes that. Engage the world that you live in, and all of a sudden, the black and white of reading becomes the color of the world that is around us, and it'll mean you're taking part. The experience of the world, real knowledge, isn't just hearing, it's understanding. It isn't just seeing, it's knowing.